Welcome to Balor, Otherworld. We're here in County Meath bringing you stories of the Olympics. Not the Greek Olympics, but the Irish ones, which predate the Greek Olympics by 1200 years. It is said that they were started by the mythological god Lugh. The Tailteann Games were ran here for thousands of years until the Norman invasion. There was an effort to resurrect these games, but unfortunately they were squashed several decades ago. We will delve into that and much more. We'll be showing you the extraordinary games and how important they were to the very fabric of Irish society. What are you waiting for? Let's go! The Tailteann Games are named in honour of Lugh's foster mother Tailteann, Queen of the Firbolg Tuatha. She is renowned for having cleared the region for agriculture. When she died, Lugh began the funeral games in her honour. Every king and ruler in Ireland had to visit. It became part of the very fabric of society in Ireland for thousands of years. The Tailteann Games took place not just in one small area. They occupied this whole region around us. These weren't small activities, but took over the entirety of the country. It captivated the imaginations of all of Ireland as the kings gathered. They had three important stages to the Tailteann Games in ancient Ireland, beginning with a celebration of the dead. These would last between 1 and 3 days, where the Druids would say prayers and they would sing songs celebrating the lives of those who have passed into the other world before us. The second point they moved on to were the kings would meet and settle their differences and lay out any changes in the law of the land that needed to occur. Finally, you had the activities, the great sporting ventures that they held, and this included boxing, sword fighting, horse racing on the lakes. It included chess and games of strategy. It was important to explore the mind as well as the body and test both to the limit. They also had competitions in storytelling, magnificent songs and dance competitions. The whole country came together and we were feeling the full expression of Ireland here for as long as it lasted. Tragically, the arrival of the Normans spelled the end of these games, but we can remember it with things such as the wishing tree, which is said to be sustained by an ancient wishing well which lies beneath it. And as you can see from the complex network of roots which return to the ground, you can see and feel the connection that we, the Irish people, have always felt to the natural world around us. So let's get moving and let's explore a bit more. We are standing at the high point of Tailteann. This area was reserved for the kings and the important members of society who would use it to view the entire games and competitions which took place below them. The races took place at the base of this hill, and the land was filled with flooded lakes which would have been used for the races, both with horses and for swimmers. Far off in the distance you will see a high point. That is the Hill of Ward. This hill is said to be the place where the first bonfire was lit for Samhain, or as we know it today, Halloween. Now, we're going to talk about one of the most unusual elements of the Tailteann Games, the trial marriages. Now, what is a trial marriage? Well, all the people who wished to have what was the equivalent of Tinder dating at the time in ancient Ireland, they would gather with whoever, I suppose, they'd selected, and the bride and groom would place their hand through a hole made in a wooden door, and they would say their vows, and a druid and high priest would perform a ceremony in which they were legally married for a year and a day, and they could basically divorce at any time throughout the year and a day once they got back to the site and performed the reverse ceremony. What about yourself? Would you try a trial marriage? Why don't you let us know, and maybe they'll bring it back for you. We've been talking about the Tailteann Games. They were held in County Meath, down behind us here, but there was another important site which we've come to here. Of course, it's the Hill of Tara, one of the most famous locations in ancient Ireland. This site held the palaces of the High Kings of Ireland. When they were holding the Tailteann Games, they would return here for their accommodation and meals and everything else, and return again to the games. A very, very important place, and it played a very big significance for Lug, of course, as it is lined up with the sun, who was Lug but the sun god of Irish mythology, and was worshipped, with this statue being given special significance when talking about Lug, who in some cases has been linked with the fertility gods of Ireland. So let's get back to Tailteann.
The games were held until 1169 AD, when the Norman invasion took place. The sacred traditions were not honoured at all by the newcomers. It became too dangerous to travel to Meath as more of the country became occupied by new rulers. Gradually the games faded, but never vanished from the minds of the Irish people. The games had a massive impact and were integral to all parts of life and death in Ireland. The 3 stages were marked by a large bonfire at their closure, and long after the main Tailteann Games ended, their impact continued to be felt in Ireland. Trial marriages took place at least until the 13th century. Traditions and customs inspired many leaders in the Gaelic revival, from the founders of the GAA to the revolutionary leaders of the time. Fortunately, the games were resurrected with the founding of the Irish Free State, as they wanted to celebrate Irish culture, reminding the world that Ireland had its own unique identity long before the Norman invasion. The games were held in 1924, 1928 and 1932. Taking place in Croke Park primarily, the games were a big success as they followed the Greek Summer Olympics and were able to attract many of the athletes who had just competed at the larger Olympic Games. Despite much early success, it was sadly not to last. The Tailteann Games were a Cumann na Gael effort, and when they lost out in the elections in 1932, Fianna Fáil took over. The leader, Eamon de Valera, was a devout Catholic, and they did not want to drive attention to a pagan festival. There was special focus placed in the 1932 Eucharistic Congress, which took place in Ireland, with over 1 million people showing up. Sadly, it is believed that this greatly hurt the numbers appearing at the Tailteann Games in 1932, with the numbers estimated to be below 30,000. The Archbishop of the time despised the pagan roots of the festival, and the church and government used the opportunity to kill funding for Tailteann. World War II further disrupted later efforts to restart it, and since then, in following decades, there have been various attempts to restart the festival, but sadly, none of them have been successful to date. But we hold out hope that these games will see the light of day again, and that we will all get the opportunity to celebrate them once more in the near future, because we won't just be celebrating a part of our culture and our identity. It is very much integral to who we are as a people.